Good morning. Welcome back to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. All right, joining me today, Jack McCann with McCann Hubbard over in the Cool Springs area. I've worked with Jack for a number of years, done a great job with my clients over the years. And one of the things that we get into is the basic estate planning. When I talk about my book, 7 Steps to Financial Freedom in Retirement, Chapter 7 is on estate planning, and I get into the 5 essential documents that form the foundation of a good estate plan. One of those being a revocable living trust. That doesn't mean everybody needs a trust, but I think most people would benefit from one over that of a will. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the basic types of trusts. And we're going to break it down. Now, there are other ways you can break this down, but we're going to start with these 2 categories, that of a revocable trust and an irrevocable trust. And Jack, why don't you talk about the differences there?
Sure. So a revocable trust is a trust that we create while we're alive, and we can make changes to it for as long as we want to. And obviously, if we're most of the time we are going to make changes. I've got a meeting later today where I'm going to, I've been working with this woman for years, and we're about to make our 5th change to her trust. And the reason is because when we started her trust, her son was, I think he was probably 12 years old. And now he's, I think, close to 30. So we've been working together for quite a while. And so it's okay. We can create a trust while you're young, as your estate is growing, and knowing that we're going to make changes over time. But then once you pass away, once this woman passes away, that trust will become irrevocable. And so her son will not be able to make changes to it. And that's partly, that reason is why the trust will protect him from his creditors. The assets that are in that trust will be protected from the son's creditors because he does not have the ability to make changes to it. So it's revocable while the grantor is alive usually, and then becomes irrevocable after they pass. You can also, however, create an irrevocable trust while you're alive. Sometimes we do that. We used to do it a lot when the estate tax credit was a lot lower, and we used to create what were called life insurance trusts. We would create an irrevocable trust, put life insurance in it to keep that asset separate from the estate. We don't do them as much anymore, but sometimes there's still good reasons. An irrevocable trust might also be created for a child who is has maybe Down syndrome or is in some other ways incapacitated, so an irrevocable trust for that child. And then we have other reasons for security purposes sometimes where we do irrevocable. But irrevocable means you can't change it once it's created. Revocable means you can still change it after you've created it. Yeah,
and we can talk more about we will talk, in fact, more about some of the ways that can be used in your planning. Jack mentioned one there with an ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust, and how those can be used. And that can be used, we used to use them quite commonly, as Jack said, to pay estate taxes. You can have the monies come in outside of the estate, not be subject to the estate tax, and provide resources to help pay those estate taxes. So that's one. And then wealth accumulation is another use for an ILIT, where we can take money, if you want to leave more money, a legacy you want to build up for your children or grandchildren, utilizing an ILIT could be very beneficial there. For larger estates, it's money that's going to go, let's say you've maxed out and you don't need it to pay the taxes, you've made good use of your exemptions, but if you left them a big life insurance policy, even though it wouldn't be subject to income taxes, it could potentially be subject to estate taxes. So one way, as Jack was saying, you put it in an ILIT, an irrevocable life insurance trust, and it comes in outside of the estate, is not subject to estate taxes, nor would it be subject to income taxes. So it's a great way to add some wealth to the family. That's another way it can be used. Let's talk a little more on revocable trust, Jack. Uses in estate planning. One of those being, of course, avoidance of probate, and gets a little bit here on the probate process itself. So you can see the bullet points there. A little bit about what probate is and how it works.
Sure, yeah. So probate is the process of changing title of the assets from the person who's passed away to the beneficiaries who are going to receive them. So if you can think of when you if you have to renew your car tags, you remember we used to go stand in line to renew our car tags. It's kind of like that. You got to stand in line to renew or to change title to something. Well, we don't have to do that with a trust, because When we create the trust, we retitle the assets at that time, and it's easy for the person who owns them to retitle them. It's just harder for the people down the line to retitle them. So if we do that while that person's still alive, when we create the revocable trust, then those assets don't have to go through probate. We don't have to retitle them in probate. They're already titled in the in the trust rather. And so we avoid that necessity of probate.
And you know, it's not a big thing. When you think about it, you created, so let's say John Smith in this example they're using, so you create the Smith Family Trust as an example. And in that's the way that you would change titles. So your home that you currently own jointly would now just have that title change to the, again in this situation, the Smith Family Trust, whatever your name is. You can name the trust whatever you want, but that's a typical one. And then with the Smith Family Trust then owns it, and you own the trust, so therefore you own it. Right? This is just a way to get things positioned. So even though it doesn't change what you do during your lifetime, doing this retitling, in other words, if you wanted to turn around and sell the house, you can do that. If you wanted to, buy another house and put it in trust, easy to do that as well. Assets can be put in and out of the trust during your lifetime as many times as you might want to. So it doesn't restrict you in any way. Doesn't change how you do your day-to-day business. Your bank account numbers stay the same. Your checks and all look the same. But on your statement, you would see the name of the trust. And this positions everything in such a way in that titling that if something did happen to you, now the person can more easily administer that which is in the trust. If it's not in the trust, then it's not going to do much good. So we have to do this retitling, and this has a tremendous amount of other benefits down the road as well. So again, with revocable trust, it doesn't alter your estate tax liability. And Jack, why don't you speak a little bit about some of these others, like not being contestable and being, again, and trust, just the same as a will, by the way. Jack mentioned earlier that she has a client coming back in to make some changes. That's pretty common if you think about it, right? Life happens. Your kids grow up. You start a will or a trust maybe when they're younger to accomplish certain goals, and now as they've grown up and they're on their own, that changes a bit. And maybe you got grandkids now. So there's things that need to be changed in your estate planning, whether you're using a trust or a will. It's very common for people to have to make changes over the course of their lifetime, at least a few times. So, all right. But Jack, why don't you talk a little more about the revocable trust there?
Sure, yeah. So the revocable trust is, as we said, a great management vehicle. It is not, I don't want you to get the misconception, though, that just because stuff's in a trust means that there won't be any taxes or that, there aren't still bills to pay. The trust is an extension of the person who created it, so it can be subject to claims. It can pay a tax. However, when it transfers to the kids, that money was not the kids' money, it was the parents' money, and so when it gets to the kids' level, it is more protected. There will still be taxes to pay. We always got to pay income taxes. Y'all know that old adage, can't avoid taxes. But that's where we get into the strategy of working with a team like Hank's office. We can strategize and figure out how to minimize income taxes. Probably not going to have estate taxes, so that's not a big deal, but we do always have income taxes, and we want to figure out how to lower those to the extent we can. But the other advantage of the trust is with probate is an ancient process. It's like I said, it's kind of simple in Tennessee, but in any state, if something's going through probate, it's easy to throw a wrench in the works and cause problems with that probate. And unfortunately, that happens a lot. If you ever want to see Jerry Springer live, you can go to the Davidson County probate courts. The judges do a great job, but you'll see a lot of people in there just really in there trying to cause problems, not necessarily with legitimate arguments or complaints. So the trust, though, avoids all that. The trust is not going to go through probate. If there is a legitimate complaint or claim, then there can be a suit filed, but it goes through Chancery Court versus probate court, and so it's a much higher burden. So the person, you don't typically have frivolous claims against a trust. The frivolous claims against estates happen all the time, but not against trust.
As we talked about, probate basically is a forum for dispute. If you've got and it makes it real easy. They open it up and you can come forward and make some such claim, and it doesn't really cost you anything. It's easily done. But as Jack just said, on the other hand, with a trust, now they've got to bring an action. They got to go hire an attorney typically. They've got to bring a court action. They're going to have to spend a bunch of money. And so that typically eliminates a lot of the frivolous claims that might otherwise be there. So this is, again, one of the advantages with trust and in the avoidance of probate might be that. And Jack, why don't you talk a little bit about irrevocable trust then? So, and again, basically an irrevocable trust can be used in a lot of different ways. Jack mentioned about irrevocable life insurance trust being one. Another being utilizing trust for long-term care. This is an area where people sometimes will want to put all their assets outside of their control, basically turn over control to someone else. Now, the purpose of that is when they're trying to preserve those assets and they feel that long-term care or nursing home kind of may be in their future. When we come back from this break, we're going to delve into that in more detail, because this is one of those areas when it comes to elder law or basically, and kind of ties in with estate planning at the same time, and understanding what the risks are both for using the trust in this way versus not. Okay, but first a break. Join us here. We'll be right back on the Retirement Report.